The engines that are available are quite powerful. Among the engines, some are legendary. To add insult to injury, there is the Ford 351 Cleveland. This beast was not simply another V8, because it was born at the height of the fighting amongst muscle cars. It was a mechanical middle finger to Chevrolet, Chrysler, and anyone else who dared to threaten Ford's dominance on the street and the track. It was a middle finger to the mechanical world. Nevertheless, here's the catch. The 351 Cleveland didn't get it through the race, despite its unbridled power, its wild personality, and its impressive racing background. In point of fact, there were those who believed that it was too hazardous to survive. What was it about the Cleveland that made it such a game changer? And what was the urgency with which Ford buried it? We will go into one of the most misunderstood tales in the history of muscle cars. What gives birth to a beast? The city of Detroit had become a full-scale battleground by the late 1960s, in spite of the fact that the Mustang was the vehicle that initiated the pony car frenzy. Chevrolet's Camaro and Chrysler's Mopar monsters were posing a threat to Ford's dominance. Ford required an engine that could compete with the small block 350 engine produced by Chevrolet and the 340 engine produced by Mopar. They needed an engine that was more compact and lighter than their large 429s and 428s, but it still could release fire. When the 351 Cleveland was introduced in 1970, this engine was not only a rehash of Ford's Windsor block, rather it was named after the city in Ohio, where it was constructed, Cleveland. Canted valve cylinder heads, which were modeled after NASCAR's 429 boss, were included in the design, which was completely original. This meant that the valves were larger, the airflow was improved, and the RPM were higher than anything else in its category. No one anticipated that Cleveland would be more advanced, slimmer, and meaner than it actually was. In other words, Ford was trying to convey the message that they are not simply here to compete, but rather to dominate. Why Cleveland was such a terrible place? Not only was displacement what distinguished the 351 Cleveland from other vehicles, it was the manner in which it utilized it. The primary variants of the engine were as follows: 2-barrel carburetor version with narrower ports, 2V version, designed to be more controllable and smoother. This vehicle is for regular street automobiles. The weird one is the 4V variant, which has enormous ports and a 4-barrel carburetor. In addition to having enormous ports and valves, the head design was designed to be able to take in enormous quantities of both air and fuel. It was none other than the 4V Cleveland that stole the show. It was able to rev to the moon and back, thanks to its enormous breathing capability, which allowed it to compare favorably to other small blocks. Instant power and tremendous top-end performance were what it meant when it was driven on the street. It was a lethal situation on the track. The teams competing in NASCAR noticed right away that this was not only another Ford V8, rather, it was a weapon. And when it was installed in automobiles such as the Mustang Boss, 351, the Mach 1, and even Panteras, the Cleveland became the core of machines that were capable of humiliating competitors on the road course and the drag strip, with a reputation of being too dangerous. But this is where things start to go crazy. The high-flow cylinder heads of the Cleveland were both the vehicle's greatest strength and its most dangerous weakness. The huge ports were ideal for racing with the throttle extended to its fullest extent. Then again, on the street, they could be erratic in their behavior. A sluggish reaction was produced as a result of the airflow becoming clogged at low RPMs. Then, as the RPM increased, the engine would let forth a ferocious burst of power that had the potential to completely overpower the tires in an instant. When it came to drivers with little to no experience, that sudden kick seemed like they were being fired from a cannon. On roads that are sloppy with rain or curves that are tight, the Cleveland has the potential to transform your dream car into a death trap. Within the wrong hands, Ford had developed an engine that was so aggressive that it was on the verge of being uncontrollable. Professional racers, on the other hand, have learned to appreciate it. It was necessary to have a skilled foot on the throttle, a precise tune, and meticulous gearing to successfully operate the Cleveland. Getting it wrong would not only result in the engine punishing you, but it could also cause it to kill itself. This meant that high RPM racing could starve bearings of lubrication, which could transform these animals into explosives if they were mishandled. The brief experimentation of a legend. 1970 was the year when the 351 Cleveland made its debut on the scene. When 1974 rolled along, it was already on life support. What was the cause of death? Politics, laws, and poor timing all come together to form a perfect storm. When the price of gasoline rose in 1973, suddenly nobody wanted thirsty muscle cars. This was the beginning of the oil crisis. Emissions regulations. The high flow heads of the Cleveland were fantastic for performance, but they were bad for complying with the increasingly stringent smog regulations. Internal competition. Ford continued to produce the Windsor 351, which was significantly less expensive to construct and more easily adapted to ever-changing regulations. In 1975, the Cleveland was no longer available in American automobiles. It existed for a short period of time in Australia, where it was adopted by the Australians and Falcons and touring car racing. However, in the United States, its time had come and gone. An inheritance from the Cleveland. Despite the fact that it burned brightly and quickly, the 351 Cleveland left behind a legacy that continues to provoke drooling among gearheads. Collectors and racers alike are looking for Boss 351 Mustangs with 4 V Cleveland blocks in today's market because of the wild and unrestrained nature of these vehicles. Through the implementation of contemporary upgrades, tuners have also resolved a significant number of the engine's oiling issues, thereby transforming the Cleveland into a dependable monster that is capable of producing staggering horsepower numbers. The Cleveland was not merely another V8 engine. A glimpse into what muscle cars might have been like if the world hadn't changed in the 1970s was provided by this event. The behavior was savage, without any remorse, and possibly even a little bit dangerous. Not only is it remembered as one of Ford's greatest masterpieces, but it is also remembered as one of his most fleeting masterpieces. Verdict. There was an engine that burned like a supernova, and it was the Ford 351 Cleveland engine. Insufficiently wild for the streets, insufficiently long-lived for mass production, but insufficiently powerful to ever be forgotten. It was the very definition of a rock star in terms of a muscle car. Loud, reckless, and left behind far too soon. Certain motors are renowned for their high level of sophistication. For the reason that it attempted to take your life, Cleveland is remembered. So, was the Ford 351 Cleveland the best small block engine that has ever been constructed? Or was it just a risky mistake that occurred during a wild era of muscle? Your thoughts are welcome in the comments section below. And if you love stories of legendary engines that lived fast and died young, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more automotive deep dives, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next ride into car history.